You're listening to Deliberate Living, a podcast that inspires, empowers, and encourages listeners to live life more authentically. My name is Holly Priestley, and I'm a full-time nomad and writer who has been living in my 1997 Ford van since January 1st of 2019. I travel the United States with my dog, learning how to live with more authenticity. I explore different ways people choose to ditch the prescribed life we've all been sold and live on their terms, finding freedom and happiness however they choose. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deliberate Living podcast. I am your host, Holly Priestley, and this week we have one of my favorite previous guests, only half of the duo this time. A few weeks ago, I featured Louie and her mom, Bexs, on the show, and today we have Bexs, and we're going to talk about something that Bexs and I are both very passionate about, and I think is a really important conversation to have, especially in like the van community or the van curious community, the van wannabe community, and that is essentially that vanning is for everyone. Like, you don't have to be a certain kind of person. You don't have to make a certain kind of money. You don't have to live in a certain kind of vehicle or have a certain kind of job. Like, anyone can do it. And I feel like Louie and Bexs and my stories are all like similar enough, but different enough that, you know, and it's the history of this whole show is just shown like all the different ways people can live different lifestyles. But vanning in particular has gotten a lot of attention, especially with, you know, the pandemic of last year, which is still going on, but it's kind of wrapping up. And I think that it's a topic that needs to be talked about more. So Bexs, do you want to talk a little bit about like how you felt about vanning before you became a vanner?
Sure. First, I want to say thank you for inviting me back. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed our first conversation so much. So it's a pleasure being here. Before van life, I lived a pretty standard, 9 to 5, 9 to 6 kind of life. I rented an apartment and was raising kids and all of that. And I was really miserable. I had dreams of being on the road. Like for years, I had been just kind of dreaming of living like a nomadic life, but it was a combination. I was kind of fearful, but I was also like not ready emotionally. And I didn't have virtual work, so I couldn't, I just couldn't do that. Plus I had kids at home and things like that. So I just started planning, I just started dreaming and researching. And I think a lot of people do that. And that's why our conversations are really important, because people who are van curious, are really looking for that. Like, is this for me? And now that I am living this lifestyle, I can't imagine going back to like exactly what I was before. I'm definitely a nomad at heart, for sure. Yeah.
How long would you say you started wanting to be a nomad or wanting to travel before you were able to? I mean, you said that you had, kids at home, and now both of your kids are gone. And like, how many years was that process of, I think I can, to finally, I did it.
Yeah, it was about 8 years, I'd say.
That's significant.
Yeah, I remember when my son was, I think he was like 9, and he's my youngest. I was like, okay, I got 8 more years, before he graduates high school. And so, I mean, I just started like, and I think that was like the very beginning when I started like, I started like with minimalism and then tiny houses and just that whole alternative lifestyle,
I think there's usually a flow that starts with minimalism and then goes to tiny houses. And that's exactly how it went. Well, almost exactly how it went for me, right? And then you really consider like all of these different things, and then eventually it's just like you chunk it down. And you're like, oh no, my van is perfect.
It's true. And then the more research, especially on YouTube, like one thing, like, how you get recommendations and then one video leads you to another. And it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was the thing. And it's like, wow, oh my gosh, it's just like mind blowing. And so I really just had like the dream, you know, and like the bug just bit me. And then it was like, okay. And then it was a constant for many years, you know, and then finally as it got closer and closer and closer, and that but in the meantime, I was struggling. You know, I was struggling to keep an apartment, to keep a head over roof over our heads because
Financially.
yeah, financially. And for many of those years, I was working a pretty good job, but I was still struggling, you know? And and then I ended up getting laid off, you know, just life happens and struggles go up and down and I just got really tired of being like dependent on somebody else saying I am valuable. Like you're
Oh my
good
God,
enough to
preach.
rent my apartment, you know, like
Yeah.
your dog is well behaved enough to live in my home. I just oh, that just irked me so much.
I feel 100% the same way. And I always had those issues with yeah, I mean, like, I have my own self-worth issues, right? I'm a human being.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
definitely have those, but then, coupled with the way our society is and the way capitalism is and the way, standard life in America seems to be, it's like somebody else also needs to approve. They need to approve
Hmm.
you to live there, and they need to approve of your dog. They, or like if you have one of those regular jobs and you're not self-employed, it's like somebody else needs to tell you that you're good enough, and they need to tell you how good enough you are, in
Yeah,
terms of salary. But then they also get to dictate like when, where, and how you get to be productive and creative, and that never worked for me. Like, I
yeah.
am a hustler and I work pretty hard on the things that I'm passionate about, but sometimes that looks like I woke up at 3 in the morning, I can't sleep, I have energy, I'm going to work. Right.
Hmm.
Sometimes it falls in the 9 to 5, but not usually. So
Yeah.
that was always
Which
like
is wonderful.
challenge. Yeah. And that
Yeah,
was always just a challenge. Yeah. And it wears on your soul
it does.
to feel like you're working all the time, and you're doing everything that you can. You're doing everything right,
Yeah.
quote unquote right in terms of society. And then also to feel like you're not making ends meet, and you're not doing the right thing, and not doing the right thing is evidenced by the fact that life is harder than it needs to be for how hard you're working. And then you have this big mental storm, all this turmoil happening with how you're going to make everything work.
Yeah. And now we're free of that, you know? Yeah. And I'm like,
Not to say that we don't have problems, like I definitely still
exactly.
have my
Yeah.
problems, but it's a
Definitely,
different
but
breed
they're
of
different
problem.
challenges. And I feel like now I'm more in control of those challenges. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're not in control, like if our vans break down and things like that. But like,
Right.
I don't know. I just we don't have. I like. It's so nice knowing that I don't have somebody dictating over me. You know,
Yeah.
and that's just like, oh, wonderful. Yeah. One challenge I do find, and I'm sure you do, it's just like, especially being in the city, it's like
Mhm.
parking, of course. You know, it's like there's so many ridiculous rules
Yeah,
that
you're
I
in
don't.
California now, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
They
it's
have
just
some
like,
of the most ridiculous rules. I have
oh,
never seen in any other city or state that I've been in, I've never seen a parking restriction based on the height of your vehicle. I've only seen that like in LA.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
wild.
It is wild. It's just, I don't know. I mean, and a part of me, like, I sort of get, I mean, obviously we need law and order and all of that stuff. And I get it. When you live in a city and you've got tons of people, there has to be some kind of control.
Mhm.
And that's why city is not for me. Out in the forest or, you know, in the desert somewhere. So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
when you were, doing your 8 years of research, and you were doing a lot of it on YouTube, I was doing a lot of mine also on YouTube and Instagram. And then, when I was looking at like specifics of like how to wire up a solar panel, I definitely went to the more written version because I needed it slower. But
Yeah.
when you were doing all of your YouTube research, I imagine that ours was similar and different just because of, the places that we are in life and the places that we were geographically. But what kinds of other vanners did you see, and how did that impact your dream of living in a van?
honestly, most of the ones that I thought didn't live very realistic lives, van life.
Yeah.
Now that I'm living van life, it was very like, oh my gosh, every day is going to be perfect, and I'm going to be parked on the beach with like all these great, views and things like that. That was really what was out there when I was researching, and now there are many more perspectives. There are women my age,
Right.
there are men my age, there are, I mean, there are people living all different ways, and is it Bob Wells? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a lot of great
Our
videos
patron
with
saint
like
of the
older people.
road.
What do you say?
I said he's our patron saint of the road person.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I think he does a really great job for people who are older and even older than me, like retirees,
Yeah.
But he really does give a rounded perspective of like true van life.
Yeah.
So I did watch some of his stuff. Um, I think, yeah, I mean, it really, because even like 2, 3 years ago, even like 2 years ago, I think there really was not as much representation on YouTube as there is now. And now, I mean, you can find people living all kinds of ways. It's amazing. And you don't have to dig as deep, to find that content.
Yeah.
Where it was still there was not as much, but you had to really dig deep. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, when I first started looking, there was more of like the aspirational vanity.
yeah,
And then these
yeah,
days, with the popularity of it growing, and then, the forced lifestyle changes a lot of people had to deal with last year. And then
yeah.
just the accessibility of places like YouTube, you do get to see a lot more representation. And I think that there's a place for all of it. I think that, sometimes you really need that aspirational stuff to really give you a kick in the pants and be like, oh, this is a thing. I'm going to do this. Right.
Yeah.
Because if somebody went on YouTube and like found my channel right away and they were like, oh, vanning, all they talk about is how normal it is and how hard it is. That's not interesting. But if you
Yeah,
look for somebody who's more like hashtag van life, hashtag blessed,
yeah,
then you're like, they might be a little bit more like ignite the fire a little bit more. But
yeah,
I think it's the content that, you and I and Louie put out and other people that is just more like realistic that you need at a certain point in the journey so that, before you get in a van, you kind of have an understanding of like, oh yeah, it's not always beautiful beaches and like wonderful locales and
yeah,
no issues at all. Like there will be issues, there will be problems, but I think that there's a space for all of it, and I think that's really cool. And I really like how many different kinds of people I'm seeing on the road these days.
yes. It's wonderful. I just I think it's so great to see all different and all kinds of vehicles too. Like it's not
Yeah.
people in for only sprinters. There are people in Ford F-150s. There are people in, vehicles like
Prius.
Priuses. Exactly. And I'm just like, do it, do it. I'm just like, live your life. That is something that like I don't really live by regrets and things like that, but I just wish that I one regret that I do have, or one wish is that I had started earlier.
Yeah.
I wish that I had had the avenue to get on the road with my kids younger, you
Yeah,
know.
with
But
your
I
kids.
mean, yeah, yeah. So that I don't know, we could have had so many more experiences, but we did a lot of road trips and all that kind of stuff. And life happens the way it happens. But
Yeah. Well, and
I
Louis
just
lives
want
in
to
a
be
van
doing
now
this.
too, so
Yeah, true, true. And you never know. My son may one day live in a van as well. Who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows? Yeah. So we're trying to talk him into it because he lives in Sacramento, and I'm telling you, the rent here is ridiculous, and it's like the new San Francisco. You
Oh,
know,
no.
it's just and it's everything's just so gentrified here. It's such a I don't know. I have such mixed feelings about gentrification because it's good, but it's bad in many ways. So it's kind of there's two sides to that coin.
I
So
feel like oftentimes I don't know how this is gonna come off, but this is a thought that I've had a long time since I lived in Denver. Um, that gentrification can kind of be like the way like towns and cities are expanding into the wildlife around them, that the animals are getting pushed out, the native animals and plants that were living there before are getting pushed out.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like the bears will come back into town like looking for food because that's where they know to find food. Like they don't listen to your no bears allowed,
I
sign. They
know.
still have to go where they want to go. And then so then with gentrification within a city that's already happening, the people who have been living there, raising their families for years, suddenly are outpriced in their own neighborhood. Like,
Yeah,
where are they supposed to go? What are they
I
supposed
know.
to do? Like, we're not
It's just,
offering alternatives. It's like, all right, we're
yeah.
going to gentrify your neighborhood, but you can stay. I don't know. There's not a
Yeah.
lot of like,
What's the
well,
solution?
yeah, what's
Yeah,
the solution there?
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. And I think that's a lot of what my struggle was in this area was gentrification. I was just
Yeah.
getting priced out of all of the markets. You know,
Yeah.
and more and more people. I mean, that's happening in every city, and all with all of the traveling we've done throughout the country this over the last year.
Yeah.
That's all you see is gentrification. All you see, and improvement is good.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing when you don't think about those who are being pushed out. Like you've got to have an alternative. It just I know it's a frustrating issue that we have in this country
Yeah.
that I'm
So
sure it's
like,
not an easy solution, but it's kind of like, come on, people, let's start thinking about it.
I don't think the solution is that hard, honestly. I just think that capitalism is
Yeah,
makes some people a little greedy and it makes
yeah,
people a little scared. And then when we're greedy and we're scared, we don't behave like humans. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
I 100% agree. Yeah. Capitalism is it's unfortunately it's kind of like a necessary evil, but like that part of it is definitely it's hindering a lot of people, and that's why van life is one of the reasons, right? Why van life and like nomadic life is becoming bigger. And I don't know, I'm kind of like, if that's the catalyst for people finding their freedom, then I don't know. It's like, I just think that being on the road is a beautiful thing,
Yeah,
living freely. And if you're able to, obviously, I mean, everybody's life
right.
and circumstances are different. Um, but I think also being pushed out of your comfort zone and having to think like an alternative way
Yeah.
can be really scary
Really good for
initially.
your brain.
It is. And I feel like if we're meant to problem solve,
Yeah.
as humans, we're meant to be nomadic, really, I feel like, I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we were thousands of
Yeah.
years ago.
Completely
And
agree.
so it's like innate, it's in us. We just have to like find that again. And I think that if we're, for people who are forced into being nomadic or like living in their vehicle or whatever, if they're able to find content like ours, you
Mhm.
know, it can give them hope, like, oh my gosh, I don't really want to be in this situation, but maybe it can be good.
I definitely recognize that, choosing to live in my vehicle was
Mhm.
a massive privilege. And,
Definitely.
I
Yeah.
talk about it all the time with my closest friends and people who understand. Like, I moved into the van by choice, and like I still love living in the van. I don't plan on not living in the van, but if I didn't want to,
Hmm.
I would have to. You know what I mean? Like, living in the van was a choice initially.
Hmm.
Now it is still a choice because I love it, but also if I wanted to get an apartment somewhere, I would have to go through that whole approval process, and I'd have to
Yeah.
stress about making a lot more money because it's so much more expensive to live stationary than it is to live my version of nomading. Nomading can be as expensive as living in an apartment. The way I do it, it's not. And
Hmm.
that's a personal lifestyle choice. But I recognize that it is a privilege that I got to choose to do it, and I had
Definitely.
time to like make it look cozy and pretty and like make it work the way
Yeah.
and not everybody has that. But I
Yeah.
still think that, if you don't choose to live in a car, if you don't choose to live, in your hometown, and you don't necessarily have the option to get out of it, there are still ways that you can fall in love with your life. And I think
Yeah,
that that's content worth sharing for sure. And I also
definitely.
think that, like you said, traveling around the country over the last year has helped you and Louis like grow as people and like grow together. And I also think that, seeing even just within the United States, even not traveling internationally, even traveling within the United States, seeing the different ways that people live and like different cultures and like different cities and like different traditions and ways of being can
Hmm.
actually be really freaking helpful and healthy for us as humans to like be able to empathize and like have compassion for and have understanding for other people. It just traveling makes you a better human.
Definitely. And I think, especially as a United States citizen,
Hmm.
like traveling our country, like, is so important. And I didn't realize this until we just did this. I mean, just having the perspective, like you're saying, of different cultures, different people, different places. It's like we are all the same, you know? I mean, we live differently and we have different experiences, but we all love and hurt and, sleep and need food and nourishment and all of that. And I don't know, it was just so powerful, like experiencing the different ways that people do things. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it's not like we were able to really converse with a ton of people and like be invited into people's homes and those sorts of things. But just being able to experience the like culture of a different city was really impactful.
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of privilege to that too, that I definitely recognize. And like you were saying about privilege in making the choice, of living this lifestyle, and making it comfortable. I think yeah, I'm grateful for that opportunity, and certainly recognize that. And I just hope it kind of it makes me sad, to think that there are many people out there who are just struggling, you know, and
Yeah.
are afraid of like having to make a change. And I totally understand it.
Yeah. I feel like any lifestyle change you're going to make in life is going to be pretty scary.
Yeah.
It took me probably 7 or 8 years from when I first heard about deliberate vehicle living,
Uh,
and then actually like making the plunge because every time, I'd get really close and I'd be like downsizing and test driving cars and doing all this stuff. But then, like, right before it happened, something would happen in life that I thought was a totally valid excuse not to move into a vehicle. And like, this is fine. I'm gonna stay in my apartment just like this much longer, whatever. Um, and then when I finally made the jump, like it wasn't so bad. And actually it's great. And like I didn't have I don't know, one of those awkward like growth periods where I had to like, or like I mean it is growth, but it's like shrinking um into the van. Like I thought I was prepared to have a couple of weeks of like acclimating to the van, and I never had that. But
yeah.
prior to moving into the van, it was very scary, and it's very, like, well, what if? So
Yeah.
many what ifs. What if
Yeah.
money? What if breakdowns? What if strangers? What if, whatever? Like, there's so freaking many what ifs. But, as with literally anything else in life, it's only really scary until you do it. And then
Yeah.
when you do it, you get that sense of capability, you get that sense of inner confidence and self-trust. And, sometimes it's still scary, but it's less scary. And you're, filing the groove in your brain to like do scary things, and like it's fine. And I think that, people are gonna struggle in life no matter what.
Mhm.
And people are gonna struggle on the road, people are gonna struggle in apartments,
Yeah.
and you need to take steps in your own life to, I guess, mitigate them in the sense that you're doing the best that you can with what you have.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
sometimes, like, if you've been dreaming about living in a van for 8 years, take it from Bex and I, like, you can do it. You can
Yeah,
totally do it. And if you don't like it, you can move back out. Moving into a vehicle is not like a life sentence.
exactly. And also, like, you don't have to build out your whole van to do it. Like,
No.
put a mattress and a cooler in your van if that's your
Yeah,
dream, and
that's all
build
you
it
have
out
to
as
do.
you can. There, I think that's like this misconception is that there's only one way to do it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, you've got to have a van, and then you've got to build it out, and you can't live in it, so you have it built. You can do it whatever way you have to do it. Like, if
yeah,
you only have $2,000 to buy a van, buy the van. You know,
yeah,
move your mattress that you have in your apartment into your van. Like,
yeah,
and I think that the more representation we have, which we're getting, you know,
yeah,
more and more
yeah.
of, the better. You know, you see people living in the back of their Priuses, like we were talking
Yes,
about, like, holy cow. And Louie has just downsized to a Jeep
I
because she,
know.
yeah, I mean, she was living in 32 square feet, and now, God knows what that is now. Probably like 18,
Yeah,
you
it
know?
has been. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's a whole different, that's privilege also being able to make that choice. But
Yeah,
you can do it in so many different ways. And I think, I don't know, and maybe many people listening or watching may say, oh, well, it's easy for you to say because you've done it. And the
yeah,
fear
that's
of the
what makes
unknown.
it easier.
Yeah. Well, and the fear of the unknown is real. Like, that's,
Yeah,
you know, and it's just taking that step. And I think a lot of people who even, like we were talking about, like, we made the choice, but I'm hoping that even people who didn't or were forced into it, once they're living more freely, hopefully, you know, they'll be able to find strength in the lifestyle.
yeah.
So,
I think,
yeah.
deliberately consuming content that is realistic as well as aspirational is important. And I
Yeah.
think that, um, surrounding yourself, whether in your real life or in your digital life, with people who are doing it, so like go on
Yeah.
social media and find people who are doing it in a way that you like, and like
Hmm.
follow them for a while, read their posts, watch their videos, listen to their shows, um, and like have that around you. Or, there's a lot of forums, there's a lot of Facebook groups, there's a lot of different ways you can connect with people who are already doing it, or people who are in the same position that you are, who are, van curious, who are thinking about
Hmm.
doing it. And you can get a lot of your questions answered that way. And you can talk to real human beings doing it in, whatever way you think might resonate with you. And you can do that research, and you can, try it on for size, see if it works out. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that that is a really great avenue for getting over some of the fear before you do it. But there's still some fear that's just not going to go away until you do it.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Yeah. And for me, initially, I was so stuck on the idea of initially I wanted to get a bus because I was thinking that my son would move in with me
Oh,
and I wanted space for him, And then eventually he was like, Mom, I am never going to live on a bus with you. And so I was like, okay, time to change my plan.
mm-hmm.
And so, and I think I talked a little bit about this with you last time. And, I was trying to get a van, I couldn't get financed and all this stuff. And
Right.
then finally Louis was like, Mom, just go small. And so I did like the minivan, and then things worked out, where I ended up with this Ram ProMaster. And, but I don't know, like, just thinking small is freeing too. Like, sometimes I'm overwhelmed with this van. Isn't that so weird? Like, thinking that
I do
I
the
used to,
same thing with my van. Like, this
yeah,
is too much space,
yeah, like
but
I could
I don't want to
literally
have it.
have this and I'd be okay. But I'm grateful. Don't get me wrong. I am grateful.
Yep.
But I could totally live in a car and be okay
Yeah. Do you
because your
have,
perspective changes, right? Like, my
yeah.
perspective has changed on what I truly need to
Yeah.
make me happy.
If I had a bigger space, I would have more stuff and I would deem all of it
Yep.
essential.
Yeah.
If I cut the van in half, it would look really weird, but then I would get rid of half my stuff and I'd be like, "Oh, why did I have all that extra stuff? I didn't need that."
Yes.
Or if I
It's so
wanted to go, travel out of a backpack, I would figure out my essentials in a backpack. Your
yeah,
essentials kind of expand and shrink with how much space you have, and when you're in a,
it's so
know,
true.
1,500-foot 3-bedroom house, like, your essentials expand to fill the space.
Yes.
So, you
It's
don't
so true. We really don't. I mean, and there are people who live out of a backpack. Like they travel the world,
Yeah.
which one day I would love to do that.
Yeah,
Just travel the world with a backpack. I would love that on the
yeah.
back of
My
a
friends,
motorcycle.
Marianne and Ash, who were just on the podcast, they're traveling out of backpacks with their big old
Yeah,
friggin' dog.
yeah, it's
Just
doable. Like, oh, I don't know. I just wish I could express enough, like how anything you dream is just possible. Like
yeah,
I don't know. Like even if you don't have a lot, even if you don't have like a permanent job, you can work seasonally. It's just
yeah.
so much of it is creating opportunity for yourself, you know?
Yeah, and seeing the opportunities that already exist around you,
Yeah,
and that does take a
yeah,
little bit of a mindset shift. Like, some people call it,
yeah,
full on manifestation. Like, you have to know what you want and ask the universe for what you want. And I think that there's a little bit of truth to that, but also I think that a lot of it comes down to, like, neuroscience. And,
yeah.
like, your reticular activating system, your RAS in your brain, sees the stuff that you tell it to see. So I bet you see every Dodge Ram ProMaster on the road. I bet you see every single one.
Of
And
course.
I
Yeah.
bet the last time you noticed a Ford E350 was, like, I don't know, maybe weeks ago, right? But I
Yeah.
see every Ford E350 there is on the road. And, like,
Yeah.
the ProMasters are cool, like, I see them because I see vans. But, like, these Fords, I see them because I'm
Yeah.
looking for them, because I've trained my brain to look for them. So if you can train your brain to see things like opportunities and, like, tell
Hmm.
yourself, today is full of opportunities, and how could this get any better? And, then you're training your brain to start seeing those things. And it takes a little bit of time sometimes.
Yeah.
But, if you put in the work and you want to change your life,
Yeah.
you can do it. I'm
Yeah.
not doing anything that you can't do. There's
Yeah.
nothing that I'm doing, and I'm sure there's nothing that Bex is doing that is 100% fully unique to us, that no other human being on the planet can handle. Like,
Yeah.
nothing about what I'm doing is unique.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
just
true.
doing it.
It's just, yeah. And for those who aren't doing it yet but want it, yeah, they just have to see the opportunity. It's so true. I mean, and we could get into the whole like everybody's got different challenges and all of that, and that's true,
Yes.
of course.
Yes.
But I am just a really firm believer in manifesting and finding opportunity and like because I've been in situations where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay rent and I've got kids at home. Fortunately, I've never been evicted or anything like that, but I mean, we've all had our challenges, and I don't know, I just feel like life is like the world is our oyster. you know it really is, because it's just what we create. It's what we make for ourselves. And I hope that with me sharing, especially being like a middle aged woman, post raising kids, like
Yeah.
anything is possible, anywhere from your age and Louis' age to my age to people who are like 60, 70. There are people on the road that are like 75 and 80 years old. I mean, and they're enjoying it and they're there because they want to be, and there are the people there who don't want to be, but they embrace that as well. you know I think there is beauty in anything as long as you look for it. you know and and a lot of what we present on our channels, and our social media, we choose what we want to share. So a
Yeah.
lot of people, they don't get to see all of the challenges that, because we do deal with challenges. I mean, there's always something, you know?
Always. There's
Always.
always going to be something. I'm trying
Always. Yeah.
start sharing more about just my day-to-day life. We were talking about this before we started recording. And I want to be like authentic and share like this is how this one person does van life. But sometimes I get caught up and I'm like, oh, this is boring. Nobody's going to want to watch this. But it's reality, and I feel like sharing the reality is important. And I think, the way you do it and the way Louis does it is also, this is reality. But we are selective. Like I'm not going to share like a live stream of my life 24 hours a day. That would be madness.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I do, so there is like a balancing. But I do think that even though we don't share everything, we still show authenticity. And that's, you can't hide them. You know what I mean? Like you can't, people know when you're not being authentic, and I think that I feel like a lot of people are really, they find that valuable, when you're, especially when they're van curious or, you know, um, because they want to know, like, or like they're finding like somebody, are they like me? They're like trying to grasp on to like, okay, I can see myself in that. I can see myself in that.
Yeah. If you can't see it, it is so much harder to be it. It's
Yeah.
not impossible. I think the popular saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think if you can't see it, it's a lot harder to be it.
Yeah.
But if you can see
Definitely.
someone living the life you want to live,
Yeah.
that gives you that much more peace of mind knowing that you can. And so I want to, again, encourage anybody who's listening who's been curious or any kind of lifestyle curious, find people
Yeah.
who are already doing the thing that you want to do and watch
Definitely.
them. And if you
Yeah.
can't find anybody doing it, you should do it anyway, but then you should also create content about doing it so that somebody
Exactly.
else can see it.
Yeah. And that's one reason why I did start a YouTube channel, because I want people my age, I want women my age to see, and there are other women my age that have content
Yeah.
On YouTube, valuable content. But I just want to add to the story, I just want people to have different versions of this life, and so I think that it's really important to have representation, of like, oh my gosh, raised her kids. I could do that too. I've raised my
Yeah.
kids, and I've had so many people, not so many people, but I've had few people comment on my videos who are like, oh my gosh, my kids are just going off to college, and I've been thinking about this, and you're really encouraging me, to do this. And I'm like, yes, do it. You
Isn't
got
it
to do it.
the most heartwarming?
I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, please do, and share your story.
Yes. Please share your story. With the accessibility of social media these days, I talk about it all the time. There's pros and cons to social media. It can be used for good. Please share your authentic story. Don't just share the highlights necessarily, but don't share everything either if you're not comfortable. But you never know who's listening to you, who needs to see how you're doing it and needs to hear how you're saying it and needs you. You don't know who needs you.
Yeah.
You needed you.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I could talk about this with you for hours.
I know, me too. I know.
In the
We've been
interest
on for
of
a while.
my poor listeners.
I know.
What's one little, nugget that you would really like to share to anybody who's listening, whether we've stated it before or not? What do you think is the one most important thing that anyone who's considering the lifestyle and is maybe afraid of it needs to hear?
Just do it.
All right.
Just do it.
3 easy syllables.
Yes. Trust yourself
Oh.
and do it. You know what I mean? If you've done all the research, you've done all of the footwork, you know what I mean? Like you're ready, you've got the funds to buy your vehicle, or you're almost there. Also, like, think out of the box. You don't need $10,000 to buy a vehicle. If you've got $2,500, buy a $2,500 vehicle that's dependable, you know? Like, you don't have to have standards that are up here. You can have standards of like where you are, step into it, you know? So that's a lot of advice or nuggets, but that's a lot of nuggets. Maybe not one nugget.
Just do it, trust yourself, start where you can with what you have.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And Bexs, where can people come find you on social media to see how you're doing van life?
My YouTube channel is Out Seeking Rainbows, and my Instagram is the same, but it's Out Seeking Rainbows with underscore between the words.
Awesome. And I will link to those in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Bexs, for being here. And I really hope that I get to meet up with you sometime on the road this year.
I hope so. Yes, I hope so.
Fantastic. And thank you to everybody who tuned in, whether you're watching, listening, or reading. I guess you're not going to hear this anyway, but I appreciate everybody who supports the channel, at least through listening. And there's other ways you can support the channel as well. Again, this is an ad-free, sponsor-free medium. It is audience supported. So if you want to be a supporter, I have ways you can do that financially or non-financially, depending on your budget. I have a Venmo and a PayPal and a Patreon set up. And then also, just liking and sharing, subscribing, giving it a thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever it is, helps us get seen by the algorithm. And, sharing this episode with somebody who you think really needs to hear it would be great. So thank you very much for tuning in. And I hope you come back next week for another excellent episode. Bye.
Bye.
We've reached the end of this episode of Deliberate Living. You can find the show notes and everything we referenced over on my website, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on YouTube, or sign up for email updates every time something new is published. I'll see you next time on Deliberate Living, and until then, keep your life on the DL too.